us. I've got the show on my own, but I have a very important guest and a very fascinating topic. This topic reads like some kind of a thriller, but in fact, it is true. The story is of an underground pipeline that the CIA and Pentagon have been using to send old Soviet and new East European weapons and ammunition to places like Syria, using falsified documents, using third-party airplanes and cutout organizations. It's very, very complicated, but thankfully we have with us Dilyana Gaitandzhieva, who is a Bulgarian journalist who really broke this story. She's been working on this story for a couple of years, breaking it in pieces and in parts while she's been covering Syria. And just recently, her reporting has been picked up by a number and corroborated by a number of organizations, Foreign Policy, Deutsche Welle, the Balkan Investigative Reporting Project, Al Jazeera, and others have also picked up on part of this story. No surprise, a lot of the mainstream media in America has ignored it, but it is a very important story to cover. So let's cut to Dilyana. Thank you so much for joining us from Bulgaria.
Thank you for having me.
Why don't you give us, we have a short time, and it is a very complicated story, fascinating but complicated. Can you give us kind of a summary of your main findings? What are the main things that you discovered in your investigation of this story?
In December of last year, I was reporting on the Battle of Aleppo when the jihadists from the Al-Qaeda affiliate al-Nusra Front retreated from their positions in eastern Aleppo. I got inside 9 underground warehouses full of heavy weapons with Bulgaria as their country of origin. When I got back to my home country, I traced back these shipments, and it turned out that these Bulgarian rockets and missiles were just a small part of a bigger international scheme of a covert international weapons shipment network involving many countries. The scheme, in brief, I will explain it for those viewers who have not had the time to read it. Silkway Airlines, which is a state-run Azerbaijani company, provided diplomatic flights to private American companies, military companies, working under a covert CIA program for non-US standard weapons. Under this program, these non-US standard weapons bought by the American companies should have been supplied and distributed to Syria, Iraq, Pakistan, Southern Africa, and other war zones around the world. The scheme has worked for at least 3 years. I have documents for the last 3 years, and the common element is that all these weapons supplies were distributed to war zones under the diplomatic cover. The diplomatic flights are exempt of checks, inspections, and air bills, meaning that Silkway Airlines flights could distribute weapons to every part of the world without inspections, without regulations. That is why the American military companies commissioned by the US government to provide non-US standard weapons to Syria and other places around the world, they chartered Silkway Airlines because no checks, no inspections no inspections can be done when the flight is diplomatic. Other mastermind of this scheme is Saudi Arabia, besides the state and the covert CIA program. Saudi Arabia purchased huge quantities of weapons from the Balkans and resupplied them to Yemen and the region of Southern Africa, Congo, and other places of interest for Saudi Arabia. Other players in the scheme are the United Arab Emirates, and the sponsoring party of all these purchases were the United States and Saudi Arabia. So these weapons were paid for with the taxpayers' money from the United States and Saudi Arabia.
So let's step back and try to figure out how this happens. So the Pentagon does business with companies like Purple Shovel and others that are weapon suppliers. The Purple Shovel and the other companies are purchasing these weapons. The U.S. government then deals with Silkway Airlines, an Azerbaijan state airline, and makes deals to make this a diplomatic flight. Therefore, it cannot be inspected. And so these weapons are loaded onto Silkway Airlines. And where do they go? Do they go to Incirlik? Where do they end up? How do they get to Syria?
One of the main points which were used for the resupply of weapons were different bases, military bases in Turkey, but not only. There were many shipments to Baku, which, according to the documents which were leaked to me by an anonymous Twitter account, and includes secret documents for arms deals and diplomatic flights. So Incirlik military airbase was used by the CIA as a command center for covert operations in Syria. For example, one main US government contractor working on this secret non-US standard weapons program, Purple Shovel, bought huge quantities of Bulgarian weapons. And according to the documents, Purple Shovel should have sent the weapons to Azerbaijan, to the Ministry of Defense of Azerbaijan. This is how Azerbaijan justifies the use of the diplomatic cover. It buys weapons for its Ministry of Defense, but according to the flight documents, these weapons destined on papers for Azerbaijan never made it to Azerbaijan. Then they were offloaded at Incirlik military airbase, which is located just 70 miles from the border with Syria. There are many discrepancies in the documents between the end-user certificates, if at all there are end-user certificates, and the flight details. I'm sure that many of these flights have attached to the documents for the diplomatic clearance false information, not only about the end-user certificates, but also the type of the weapons which were transported on board. The fact that these flights were diplomatic means that even now we can't say exactly what was transported on board of these diplomatic flights, because nobody checked them. No regulation, no inspections, nothing. They can transport everything from one place to another without regulation. This is why Silkway Airlines and Azerbaijan are the key players in the scheme, because without this diplomatic cover, this scheme could not have worked for at least 3 years.
And we're talking about billions of dollars now, right? Well over $1 billion, maybe more. But you have the documents. You published the documents. As a matter of fact, on the Ron Paul Institute website, we republished an article that Zero Hedge had, where they had several clips of these end-user documents the U.S. government filled out, and it certainly seemed to demonstrate how they were falsified. From first, they were for the use of the U.S. and its allies, and then the end use was for Syria. So we're looking at the possible falsifications of document. This looks like a covert U.S. plan to arm the Syrian rebels. They would probably say to arm the moderates, but that wasn't the case, was it?
I have been covering this war in Syria almost since its beginning, and I can assure you there were no such thing as moderate opposition since 2013. I interviewed the deputy commander of the Free Syrian Army, Colonel Malik al-Kurdi, the so-called moderate opposition, but in Turkey, not in Syria, because at that point, the Free Syrian Army wasn't present, and still it is not present in Syria. So there is no such thing as moderate opposition in Syria. How can opposition be moderate when it is heavily armed and when it kills civilians? I can give another example about how the diplomatic flights with heavy weapons for terrorists was used by some American companies. A case in point. For example, we're talking now only about Syria. I mean, not me and you, I mean mainstream media, but what is happening, which is hidden for the general public and can be understood very well by inspecting all these 350 documents which concern diplomatic flights. It turns out that these secret programs, it is not only about Syria, it is also about Pakistan. And what is happening there is that the Islamic State and the jihadists in Syria are somehow being transferred to Pakistan. One flight with heavy weapons under diplomatic cover, chartered by an American company called Kemring Military Products. Yet again, this company is a main U.S. government contractor for the supply of non-U.S. standard weapons to the U.S. international allies. So this flight was diverted from Afghanistan, where its final destination was, and landed suddenly in Pakistan, in Lahore. There is no other explanation for this diversion of the flight and the extension of the flight by more than 1,000 kilometers other than offloading in Pakistan. In Pakistan, there are no moderate rebels. There are the Taliban and the Islamic State. So we should follow what's going on not only in Syria, but in other areas in Asia as well. And in Southern Africa, there are many shipments under diplomatic cover to Southern Africa, a region which is plagued by wars for control over the wealth in gold and diamonds found in African countries. Interest in this region takes Saudi Arabia because it is the sponsoring party to many of the purchases made according to the documents which were leaked to me. I want to stress these documents are genuine because they were obtained by hackers after a cyber attack. The Azerbaijani embassy to Bulgaria confirmed their computer network was subjected to a cyber attack. Hence, these documents are absolutely genuine. No matter how the United States and Saudi Arabia or other countries, the Bulgarian authorities as well, try to falsify the documents, we have the real documents. And I urge the United Nations to launch an independent investigation into these documents and these diplomatic flights, because if the United Nations really wants to end the war in Syria, in Yemen or elsewhere, it should start with stopping the weapons supplies under the cover of diplomatic flights. I don't believe that this would happen, because it means that some permanent UN Security Council members should investigate themselves. It turned out, according to these documents, that the very same UN member states which claim to fight terrorism actually have facilitated it for years. And this can be verified and this can be investigated by check and inspection of these documents. I can provide these documents to everybody who wants to reveal the truth. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, because I'm a war correspondent, and what I want in the end is accountability. Somebody must be held to account for the killing of more than 500,000 people in Syria alone. What about Yemen and Congo? South Sudan, Somalia, and other places around the world. Somebody must be held to account, finally.
Indeed, yes. So you've been covering Syria for a while, and then someone got in touch with you and gave you these documents. Is that what started you on the trail of this sort of underground weapons pipeline? Is that what got you going on it?
Yes, exactly. I had the proof from my reporting on the ground in Syria. I found Eastern European weapons in warehouses where Al-Qaeda affiliates store their weapons. Later on, I continued following the shipments by sea, but it was nothing compared to the weapons supplies by air, by Silkway Airlines. Can you imagine how many weapons have been transported on board these diplomatic flights for 3 years? Hundreds of tons of heavy weapons. And these weapons are still in the hands of the terrorists. No matter the public information that the CIA program has been terminated, this doesn't mean anything. The diplomatic flights continue now. Even when we are talking now, a Silkway diplomatic flight is carrying weapons to various locations around the world, because I checked this information, and I can assure you, no matter our investigation, this scheme is still working.
So you say that today, as we speak even, these flights may be taking place. The whole CIA being off the case is beside the point. So who would be running them now? Is it the Pentagon, the Special Forces Command? Is that who's in charge of it, do you think?
I got a video 5 days ago from Rojava. This is a region in northern Syria with trucks full of American weapons destined for the Kurds. Which means that the weapon supplies continue. This time they are for the Kurds, but nobody can control what Saudi Arabia is going to do, because I can assure you, the weapon supplies from Bulgaria to Saudi Arabia have never stopped. They continue even now. So the weapon supplies to jihadists will continue via Saudi Arabia. So nobody is talking about the role of Saudi Arabia. It is essential. Nobody can control Saudi Arabia. I tried to contact them. The embassy in Sofia responded that I would never get any answer.
Well, certainly this administration in the U.S. doesn't seem like it's willing to call Saudi Arabia on this. They must support what they're doing. But can you tell us a little bit? So you're an investigative reporter from one of the largest Bulgarian daily newspapers. You come across a blockbuster story, complete with all kinds of documents and backing, and we'll link to your story in our description of this show, and they can see for themselves the documents. You have a blockbuster story. It's fascinating. But then what happens to you? You don't get the journalistic awards that you're supposed to get. You end up getting into some trouble. Is that not right?
I was interrogated by the Bulgarian National Security Agency because the Azerbaijani embassy to Bulgaria urged the Bulgarian authorities to investigate the issue. The leaked documents, not the content of the documents. So the Bulgarian authorities did investigate the issue. I was interrogated about the source of information that I published. The Bulgarian intelligence agency didn't want to know details about what I found in Aleppo. They even didn't ask me to provide genuine footage of weapons with the jihadists in Aleppo. They just wanted to know my sources. A few hours later, I was the contract with the newspaper where I used to work was terminated without any explanation. But I don't want journalism awards. What I want is the support of the people from all these countries involved, so that we can press our governments to stop supplying weapons to terrorists. I don't don't accept the explanation, oh, it's legal. No, it is not. No matter that Bulgaria or other Balkan states, Serbia, Slovakia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, no matter that the shipments are official to the U.S. Special Operations Command, in the end user certificate, you don't have the final destination and the final user of these weapons, meaning that Bulgaria and other Balkan states who are members of and who are party to the UN Arms Trade Treaty should stop immediately the weapon supplies. Obviously, the end user is not the same as those stated in the documents. The United States and Saudi Arabia don't buy these weapons for its militaries. Neither the US military nor the Saudi army use non-US standard weapons or Eastern European weapons. These are Soviet-style weapons. So obviously, these weapons are destined to a third party, meaning that here we are talking about international criminal case. You have shipments to terrorists. Al-Qaeda and the Islamic States are terrorists. Besides my evidence from Aleppo, I have inspected and watched no matter how unpleasant it was, numerous videos and photos posted online by the jihadists themselves. And you can see in their hands Bulgarian weapons, Eastern European weapons, not only in Syria, but also in Yemen. And this is verifiable information, and it can be used as yet another proof where these Eastern European weapons have gone.
Well, this is a fascinating story, Liana, and I want to thank you very much for joining us. I hope that other news organizations will see your work and will expand and do further investigation. I certainly hope you'll be contacted because you sound like a terrific investigative reporter. You should be out there working again. I'm sure it will be not long before you are. So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me and taking interest in this story.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of our viewers today for the Liberty Report. This is the kind of news that you won't see in the mainstream media, that we dig into. We want to find out U.S. interventionist foreign policy, the things that you don't see, the horrors that happen when wars are propped up by U.S. foreign policy. So once again, thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report, and please come back and see us soon.